I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone to Luncheon with the League. A reminder that we do have closed captioning available. And you see here on the screen at the bottom of your screen, there is a set of options. You'll see chat or various things, mute. And along there, you'll see the CC or live transcript. Please use that if you need to have closed captioning, and hopefully one of my trusty friends from the League of Women Voters is also texting that, putting that into the chat. We love to know, and I'm sure the Chief Justice would love to know where you're all from. So if you want to put in the chat your name and what county or city you're coming from, that would be great. I want to remind everyone of upcoming events that we have. The first is in partnership with the Ohio Council of Churches, and that is tomorrow. I cannot believe that it's August 10th. And so we'll be looking at redistricting from a nonpartisan faith perspective. And then we have community mapping, where you get to think about how, those of you in Northeast Ohio get to think about how you think the district should be drawn. Our super volunteers, we'll have our volunteer huddle Wednesday night. And then next week we have a webinar about education. So let's go to the next slide, please. Just a reminder that it's time, we have a once in a decade opportunity to work on redistricting. And really, we've been working on redistricting reform for 50 years, and finally have some reforms in front of us. Does take financial needs, so please consider supporting us. Next. Youth in Action, I'm so thrilled about this. This is our new program. It's activism for and by young leaders. Most recently, they elected 2 members of Youth in Action to serve on the LWVO board. So we'd love to have young people join us for that. You can find out more on our website. Of course, become a member or remember to renew your membership. Absolutely incredible opportunity just to be part of the League family. Let's go to the next slide. And I am so thrilled to be having with us today Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor of the Supreme Court of Ohio. Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor is the 10th Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Ohio and the first woman to lead our state's judicial branch. She's been elected twice as justice and twice as Chief Justice, and she's had a long career before that, serving as a private lawyer, magistrate, common pleas judge, prosecutor, Ohio Lieutenant Governor, and Director of the Department of Public Safety. She's led both the state and the nation in a number of judicial reforms, including looking at fines, fees, and bail practices. She has ongoing initiatives, including data collection and racial fairness in the court system, conviction reform, expansion of technological innovation in the courts, improved civic education for school children, citizen awareness in judicial elections, increased funding for civil legal aid efforts, legal aid so important, as well as the governmental response to the United States drug epidemic. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time speaking today. Hopefully it gets better as we get this conversation going. But first, I just want to welcome you, Chief Justice, to joining us with the League. This is just a chance for us to get to know some of Ohio's leaders better and hear what inspires you and what you've been thinking about lately. So please welcome Chief Justice.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation to be here. It's my pleasure. I've spoken at various chapters of the League of Women Voters around the state over the years. I don't know that I've been on a forum such as this. Maybe it's a new forum, but I think it's a great idea. Not only because you can hear from whomever you invited as the speaker, but you've got the perspective of your membership from around the state, which I don't have to tell you is probably pretty diversified. I'm in my home in Akron, and don't be fooled by the Eiffel Tower in my background. It's just one of the only, I switched laptops. In other words, I bought a new laptop and I haven't been able to download the appropriate backgrounds yet, although I think the Eiffel Tower is appropriate anywhere. But anyway, again, I'm glad that Jen has invited me. And I'm just going to tell you, one of the last things she said is, what inspires me? It's the same thing that inspires me today that inspired me, in 1985, and that's public service. I have chosen to use my law degree for public service and never look back. And I have been able to do that quite successfully. And she listed all the dream jobs that I've had, and I readily admit, especially when I talk to students, I talk about all of the great positions I had, and many of them would have been jobs that people would have, been satisfied to be in for the rest of their career. And being a judge, being the county prosecuting attorney, those were both jobs that people, land via elections, and then they stay there because that's their niche and that's what they're good at and that's what they do. And without growing a third arm to pat myself on the back, I was good at those jobs. I was very good at those jobs. And because I think I was pretty good at those jobs, I was asked to do more on a bigger stage. And I think that happens. I'm not the only one that's happened to, but it happened to me. And I was, had to make a decision. Do I want to leave the comfortable little home that I have for myself here on the bench, or then in the prosecuting attorney's office, or will I go statewide? I did go statewide as lieutenant governor, director of the Department of Public Safety. While I was director of the Department of Public Safety, 9/11 happened. And I was catapulted into Ohio's chief, liaison with the efforts of the newly formed Homeland Security Department. And then, that brought me in contact with all of the emergency management agencies throughout all 88 counties, our fabulous emergency management state agency that we have, and then, as I said, on a national basis. That was a real learning experience, and it was a wonderful experience. I'm sorry that I had to have it, but it was a wonderful experience to learn, to grow, and then to be able to integrate services. I was at 9/11 a week after it happened in New York City. The urban search and rescue team from Ohio was there the day after 9/11, and I went a week to the day just to bring things to them, kind of as a goodwill to bolster their spirits. Letters from home, the Ohio flag, Cheryl's Cookies donated boxes and boxes, Grader's ice cream boxes and boxes, and these were men and women who were housed at Javits, convention center, big, area, and bunk beds and cots. And I'll tell you, the most important thing were those letters from home, and it still chokes me up to see the reaction to that, having been gone a week and having done what they've done. So my hat is still off to the the men and that did that. So anyway, moving ahead. I became, I was lieutenant governor. The option presented itself to run for the Supreme Court. When I resigned from the Common Pleas Court to become the prosecuting attorney in Summit County, I always thought in my mind, I'm going to be prosecutor for maybe 2 terms, maybe 3, and then I would go back to being a Common Pleas Court judge, because I really enjoyed this problem-solving aspects of being a judge. And at the end of my first term as lieutenant governor, as I said, the opportunity to get on the Supreme Court, I thought, okay, here's an opportunity to get back on a court, different court, bigger arena, but to do so. And I took advantage of it and was elected, thankfully, and continued to be elected as I ran for a second term. I then decided that I was going to run for Chief Justice. Not something I thought of doing when I became a justice, but the opportunity presented itself. I felt that I could fill that need and fill the position. I was elected. I always like to mention by all 88 counties, and I did that also when I was elected as a justice in 2008. So I look at that as a mandate from the people to do something. And I always look at, I don't care what your margin of victory is. If you're an elected official, you've got a mandate to do something and not just be comfortable in the job that you're in and fill a slot and just become somebody that, like flows with the tide. You've got to be able to look at the systems and see where they need to be shored up, maybe where they need to be, thrown out and a new system put in place. And you have to realize who you need to bring to the table in order to have that done. And that's something that I've been able to do very successfully all along in my career, but especially as Chief Justice. Some of the reforms we were able to put in place, some of the acknowledgments that we've gotten, for bragging rights. Last week I was in Williamsburg, Virginia, and the National Center for State Courts was celebrating its 50th anniversary. We in Ohio won out of the entire country the best program for civics education, which is called the Sandra Day O'Connor Award for Civics Education. And our civics education department won that award. And I was so proud of them. And, if you have not done so, I would ask you to take a look at our website, which is sc.ohio.org. And you will, .gov, sc.ohio.gov, and click onto our website for civics education, and you will see why our civics education program and our facility that we have at the Supreme Court of Ohio is a national leader. I think we have easily the top facility in the country. And other justices, my peers, are extremely jealous that we have these resources, but we're blessed to do that and to take it to the level that we've taken it to. And that's a tribute to the folks that work in that department and our partners, teachers, League of Women Voters, everybody that wants to educate children and young adults about our court system. It's a fabulous opportunity, and I talk about it all the time. But that brings me to some of the things that I've been able to do as Chief Justice and some of the priorities that I have. I put out in 2013, 2000 and 2014, kind of a blueprint, manifesto or whatever, on how we should improve the election of judges in the state of Ohio. And I did so with the understanding that, first of all, it's a constitutional amendment. And secondly, when the voters of Ohio were given the opportunity on whether they want to continue with an elected system, or they want to continue, or they want to change to something else, merit system, whatever, they resoundingly rejected it. They rejected it in 1939, and they rejected it 50 years later in 1989 by pretty much the same margins, 2-1 at least. So people say, no, I want to vote for my judges. And then we look at the drop off. And so it's kind of ridiculous when you look at that and you say, they don't vote for judges, so what do we do here? We encourage people to vote. And that was a lot of the suggestions I'd had, ways to do it. The legislature did not think that they were worthy of following, I think, because it was a total departure from how we do things. And they didn't have a political appetite to do that. So fast forward, here we are. Guess what? We're doing something that I recommended against back in 2013. And that was, I said, let's have open primaries. And the two top vote getters get, head to head in November. I don't care if they're 2 Ds, 2 Rs, one of each. Let's see what happens. And just the opposite has happened. Now that we have partisan primaries and we have partisan general elections for appellate level judges, and there's 68 appellate level judges, and there's 12 appellate districts in the state. Some of them are one county districts, some of them are multi-county districts, up to like 15 counties. And then the Supreme Court, all the Supreme Court races, you're going to see an R or a D next to the name on the ballot in November. Is that a good thing? You know what? It's an experiment, as that's the way I look at it. Time is going to tell. Is it going to increase voter participation? I think there's a huge difference between increased voter participation and informed voter participation. The prediction by those that opposed it, and on both sides, were, well, people are just going to pick up a slate card and they're just going to go down the slate card and they're going to vote for either the R judges or the D judges. Well, it's probably true, but those slate cards were mailed to your home anyway, based on your voter registration. They were handed out at the polls prior to this to your voter registration. So, you know, it's nothing new, really. So what do we need to do? We need to educate the public about the resources available so they can find about the judges. It's not enough to read an endorsement in a newspaper. Many people don't read the editorial pages. Many people don't receive the newspapers. So how are we going to get them educated about the judges? And it's been a really slow process. We do have judicialvotescount.org, the League of Women Voters, one of the partners in doing this. Each election, the participation grows. Of people who have looked at the website, people who have spent time on the website, people who have come back to the website. It's a really interesting and easy website to use, and I hope you're all familiar with it. The problem is that people are not aware of it. Now, fortunately, the legislature shook loose some money for a line item in the Supreme Court's budget, so we can use $150 or $150,000 each year to promote judicial elections, judicialvotescount.org. You know, how we're going to do this? Are we going to do banner ads? Are we going to do, you know, we have to, it seems like a lot of money in the big picture, especially a year when there's Senate races and all the statewide, et cetera. We cannot waste money on television. You know, we wouldn't break through. So we have to be creative on how we can use those dollars to get people educated, and social media is probably going to be the method that we're going to use to do it. And again, we're putting a team together to figure that out. So anyway, that's the you know, the latest on getting people to vote and you know, vote intelligently for the judicial elections. We've got other things in the works. I'm really, you know, hot on the trail of bail reform. People spend inordinate amount of time locked up before their case is even, before they even come before the court, let alone their case, you know, being resolved. And nonviolent offenders, you know, low-level offenders, even medium-level offenders that are nonviolent, and you know, can be released from the jail with conditions such as an ankle bracelet, daily monitoring, all that sort of stuff to control their activities on the outside. So we as taxpayers are not, you know, footing the bill for them to be sitting in the jail. They're being able to go to whatever jobs they have. They're not losing their housing. They're not losing their support system. And they show up, especially with new notification systems that we've put in place. Thanks to COVID. And, you know, that's one of the silver linings of COVID was the use of technology. And we have used that, the courts have used that, the lower courts have used that to remind people to come to court. And it's been an overwhelming success in the decline of failures to appear. So that's one of the good things that came out of the technology. There's a ton of other things. We have a report on our website. It's called iCourts. It's the task force report, the iCourts task force report. It lists 97 recommendations on going forward with the use of technology in our court system, our criminal justice system. Again, if you're interested in that, take a look at that. So every time I say take a look at something on our website, it's because we have such an information-rich website. There's so much stuff there. If you've got a question, you're going to find information on there that is going to help you. I guarantee it. So civic ed is something that I'm, you know, wildly, you know, out there in favor of. I'm going to just close my remarks and talk about data collection, and then I want to take your questions. Data collection, there's not a successful business in this country that doesn't navigate how they do business because they've collected data. They've collected data on their customers, they've collected data on their expenses, on their, you know, projections, what the market's doing, etc. We in the court system are spending all these taxpayer dollars on systems like bail reform, pretrial incarceration, as I mentioned, post-conviction, sentencing, judicial release, which is another name for, putting you on probation, that sort of thing. And look at our incarceration, the dollars we spend on that. I think those are second only to maybe Medicaid in our state budget. So we got to be smarter on how courts do business. We've got to be able to give the legislature and the executive branch and ourselves data. We have a progress in place to collect sentencing data. My vision is that we collect data on everything that happens from the decision of the officer to arrest, to the charges that the prosecuting attorney brings, to the pretrial experience of that individual, whether they're detained, whether they're released, how are the circumstances of release, to what happens, during the court pretrial and what happens through the sentencing and post-sentencing. That will give us the entire picture. And we're starting right now on data, collecting data information from the judges as they are in their pilot projects. With each pilot project, we get more judges who are buying into the program, buying into our project, and that's very, very encouraging, because we need those judges to be ambassadors to other judges and tell them about this, how important this is, and they see how important it is after we, after like anything, you educate them, you get them to participate, and they buy in readily, and it's a great thing. For those of you who are keeping up, I've got 1 year and 4 months left on my term. I turned 70 on Saturday. Now the reaction is, oh my God, you don't look 70, right? You're nowhere near 70, right? But anyway, I did, and by constitution, I cannot run again. So there will be a new Chief Justice come January 1st, 2023. So I feel a real sense of urgency to try and move this, these projects along, everything I've got going. I'm impatient. People know me, they know I'm an impatient person to begin with when it comes to getting, things done. But this is going to be, the focus, definitely the focus. So with that, questions?
Thank you so much, Chief Justice. So first off, happy birthday. Thank you. I mean, you ended up covering many of the things. I wanted to talk about judicial votes count, which we do promote far and wide. And maybe we'll do another session just specifically on judicial votes count at some point in terms of why that's important. I probably have 50 questions, so we're going to run out of time here, but I want to start with one. We have local leagues across the state that do their own candidate forums. We do candidate forums. I'm also a member of the Ohio Debate Commission, and League was a founding member of that. Help us understand what questions judges and judicial candidates can answer or not, and why.
All right, judges are governed, but that's a great question, Jen. A lot of people don't really get it because why would they? They can ask a partisan candidate any question. They can ask them anything from their shoe size to what do they feel about abortion. Well, we can tell you our shoe size, but going forward, judges have to be impartial on the bench. And that means that they cannot telegraph to the public, here's how I view abortion. Here's how I view voting rights. Here's how I view some of these, controversial, hot button topics or mundane topics, about, civil actions, for example. They can't telegraph that how they're going to vote, because then they're not impartial. Let me give you an example. A judge goes out there and they're campaigning and they're saying anybody that comes before me and is charged with rape and is convicted is going to get the maximum sentence. Okay, well, that tells me is that judge is not going to pay attention to the law, not going to weigh in the factors that a judge has to weigh in when they're sentencing someone to, within the parameters that the legislature has laid out. and they're not going to be objective. They're not going to be fair. They're just going to, rote just by, and so you can't say that as a judge. If you do say that, that's against the ethics, that we all abide by. It's disciplinable. In other words, you can go before the disciplinary council, and you can have sanctions from the disciplinary council. So a judge can't telegraph how they would vote on things. Now, a lot of judges say, when asked a prickly question, well, I'd like to answer that, but I can't because of judicial ethics. Okay. And some judges, I think, stretch that judicial ethics thing, and candidates stretch it way too far. I can tell you how I personally feel about abortion. I can tell you how I personally feel about abortion. But I have to tell you, it doesn't matter how I personally feel about abortion. I will follow the law as it is currently in place. I'm not going to, I'm not going to deviate from that because it is the law. Now, if the question is the constitutionality of a law, then I'm going to be able to, determine whether that law is constitutional or not. But if the question is only the application of that law, I can't say I don't agree with that law, so I'm not going to enforce it. I'm not going to apply it. I would be abdicating my responsibility, my oath of office, and my promise to the people of Ohio, if that's the way I conducted my business as a judge. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, and I'm going to drill down just a little bit more for those that might be different thinkers. So how is being an elected judge different than being an elected lawmaker or someone who's elected to the executive branch?
Well, a judge, cannot write the law. They can't change the law. We have statutes. Those statutes are written by the legislature. They are signed into law by the governor. The governor can veto certain parts of, things. He could veto the whole legislation. He could, but we have the laws that the legislature puts into place. They have hearings on these laws. They hear from one side. They hear from the opponents. They hear from other constituents out in their district, and they vote on it. And, that's how laws get passed. It's not a perfect system. I will be the first to, and I think legislators would agree with that. Sometimes they pass laws and they're imperfect. Sometimes they pass laws and they're unconstitutional. They don't intend to pass unconstitutional laws. It just turns out that way. And so then those laws are challenged and they come before the court, and then the court rules on the constitutionality. We all know that, heard the term checks and balances. This is the check that balances the government, because that law is put to the test in the court of law. And that's the distinction between, the judiciary and the legislature. The judges cannot write a law. We can say whether the law is constitutional. If it's unconstitutional, we can strike portions of it. Most statutes are multi-segmented. We could, strike the portions that are unconstitutional, or we could strike the whole law, depending on what it is, as an unconstitutional exercise of, it's against the constitutional. It's against the Constitution of the state of Ohio, and chances are of the United States Constitution. And that's a little distinction. Let me just bring up, we have a Constitution of the state of Ohio. It's a very, very important document. And oftentimes we get cases that, someone wants to say something is unconstitutional on behalf of their client, and they use the Ohio Constitution, because as Ohio, as our own Constitution, we can offer more protection than what the United States Constitution gives to Americans. In Ohio, we can do that, and we have done that on occasions. And interestingly enough, some of the cases that we've had in Ohio have later been decided in the United States Supreme Court, and they've cited Ohio as a basis for the reasoning that they're using to decide the same way we did. The need for example, a warrant to get your cell phone information decided first in Ohio. We said, yes, you needed to do that. certain search and seizure is decided here in Ohio, then the United States said, yep, we think the same way. So basically, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I hear sometimes people say that the judicial branch is becoming more partisan. I don't know personally. I'm wondering your thoughts on that, if it has become more partisan, and also how we protect the judicial branch from being partisan.
I don't think that the judicial branch has become necessarily more partisan. I think it's become more philosophically divided. And I think that's the Supreme Court. I think you can see that if you pay attention to our opinions. There's a philosophical divide. And, there is a path of thinking, originalism, textualism. I think you probably have heard that. The late Justice Scalia was a champion of originalism. The current Justices Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, along with other justices, they look at textualism. What do the words say? And then you got to figure out, what do the words mean? And so that's how they look at statutes, and that's how they look at documents that are being scrutinized by the court. And then there's other method of looking at it and saying, okay, let's look at that, but let's look at it in terms of today, not in terms of the late 1700s, not in terms of the late 1800s or 1863, when our Constitution, 1912, when the Constitution was revamped in Ohio. Let's look at that in terms of today, and what does that mean to Ohioans or Americans as of today. And you will see that there's some strict constructionist textualists on our court, and then there's others that believe that we need to be more current in our interpretation of or the way we do our job, and the law, applying the law, and certainly applying the Constitution.
That's really helpful. Let me ask you, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We know that there are gender gaps in terms of the number of women in leadership roles in the legal field, and especially so for women of color. So first, I wanted to ask about what it was like for you as a young woman. And obviously those gender gaps existed then when you were in law school and you were rising. So what was that like for you, and how do we fill these leadership gaps?
Well, briefly for me, I grew up being encouraged by both my parents, grandparents, etc., that I could do anything I wanted, and they would support me in doing anything, support me, educationally, etc. Education was the focus. That was absolutely the focus. My parents, my grandparents, all college educated, so there was no question. You're going to be educated, and that was going to be the focus, and you're going to do well in school, and that's your job as a kid. That you got to be, you got to do that. So I never grew up thinking that girls or women were inferior in any way, and I never thought that I would have to break a barrier of any kind, to get in law school. I was in law school. I started law school in 1977, and that's just when the tide started to turn, and we had more women in my law school class, and that's when women started going to law school. And so there was, kind of a camaraderie amongst the women, and there was not a pushback from the male students there. So I didn't, I didn't feel that. But I'm not saying that if others did, that it was illegitimate. Not at all. I never felt that I had pushback in the profession either. I started out doing, small business, for civil matters, criminal matters. I took appointments from the criminal justice. I took appointments from probate court. I, had clients in probate. So I was kind of a generalist, and I didn't feel the courts were sexist when it came. Now I say that, And way back then, there was a judge who was disciplined for being just that, sexist, openly sexist from the bench. But he was disciplined, and he was disciplined at that time. That was in the late 80s, and that was kind of one of the first. He truly was sexist against women in his courtroom, not in a bad way. He was very complimentary. He was overly complimentary. He was too complimentary. He was creepy complimentary, and he was disciplined. That was a good thing and to have happened. It was a good example early on for the bench and the bar. So, so I've been able to be successful in positions, and I think largely in part because of the way I was raised. That's the only thing I can attribute it to be confident in yourself, to be prepared as best as you possibly can, and then to risk doing the job. Now, I say that, and I don't say that women who are discriminated against are not competent, or that are not prepared, or don't have it in their mind that they can do the job. I just was fortunate enough not to come up against men who would, treat me that way. Again, I think I was lucky. Once I started getting elected, I was the boss, trying to speak, and so I didn't have someone that was going to treat me, differently. And I made sure that my employees were never treated differently because they were women. Never. And I have employed many, many people throughout my career, and many, when I was prosecuting attorney, we had hundreds of people working at the Department of Public Safety, almost 4,000 people working for the Department of Safety. And now, at the Supreme Court, we have a building full of people. And we've got fabulous employees. So, all right, how can we get more women into, I think organizations have to be, their strength. I really do. I think that there are more women who are stepping up and stepping out and identifying themselves as, competent in whatever walk of life they're doing, and they're doing so, successfully. I think originally, when you talk about women in the workforce or women, you're talking about, for the most part, straight white women. That was, am I right? I mean, that's what, people. So now I think the breakthrough is when we talk about gender equality, we're talking a whole different language of gender equality. We're talking about, well, first of all, race, is just accepted. That's what you mean, gender equality and all that means. We just had a United States Supreme Court decision maybe 2 years ago that came out and said, discrimination, based on sex means discrimination for transgender and, people of a different, just diverse identification, self-identify. And that's, to me, that's progress. That's progress. That's progress in the law, but it's also progress in our thinking and how we need to be accepting, and we need to be realistic and realize that it's no longer straight white women that need our protection and need our voice and need the opportunities and need the recognition. Just like, men, there are men that are not straight white men, and so the movement has to be, okay, let's make sure that the acceptance is there, that the facts are there. And that's a culture shift, and culture shifts can happen quickly based on an event, or they can happen gradually. Say what you want about our United States Supreme Court, and I have been highly critical of our United States Supreme Court because I believe they should have cameras there when they're live cameras, and we should be able to watch it. The public should be able to watch it. I've said that for years. I've been on public forums in Washington, D.C. about it. I've just, they probably are sick of hearing from me. But the United States Supreme Court did allow for same-sex marriage. And again, an Ohio case, they were excoriated in many circles for that. But I champion them for having done that. And then Justice Gorsuch's opinion that just came out, like I said, in the last maybe 2 years, about protections that the United States Constitution affords. Now, remember, I talked about state court constitutions. Keep in mind, state court constitutions can exceed the national constitution, the U.S. Constitution in its protection, but it can't go below that. So a state court could never say, okay, well, that's what the United States Supreme Court says about transgender and persons, but we're going to use our Constitution to exclude or say it doesn't. They can't do that. They can't do that. They can only offer more protection, not less.
So the U.S. Constitution is the floor, and we can go beyond that.
It's often described to that. I don't like saying it's the floor because, but I like to say that simply we can exceed.
Okay. Point taken. I've got 2 more questions for you. The first is, I have read your 2013 policy recommendation paper for really improving judicial elections and really just the judicial branch itself. If you had a magic wand and you could get a couple of those things, recommendations done right now, what would they be?
Well, I really, I look at the flaws of the merit selection. I look at the flaws of the elected system. I think the merit system is a good system because I like the idea of a retention election. So how you get on the bench to begin with is the question here. I don't care if you get on the bench by a partisan election, or I don't care if you get on the bench by gubernatorial selection and appointment. I don't want to see you get on the bench because you've been selected by the legislature. There's one state that does that. It's either North or South Carolina, one or the other one. But I wouldn't see that as being a good springboard. But whether you're elected or whether you're appointed, through a commission and appointed by the governor, but I am for retention elections. You get on, you get, on there a certain length of time, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever. And then you have to stand for a retention election, which means the voters have to do thumbs up or thumbs down based on your record and based on, how you've done in your first, opportunities as a judge. And then, you have a retention election every 8 years, every 10 years, something like that. I think that's a hybrid, what I just described. And I think it's a good way to do it.
Thank you. Well, we have so many more questions we could have gotten to, but one I have for you is, what's next for you, given that you are so passionate about the judiciary and civics education? Obviously, you've got some time to figure this out, but what do you think is next for you, Chief Justice?
I don't know, but I want to continue the bully pulpit and good work or goodwill that I've been able to accomplish. And my reputation for being passionate about, certain things. So I really would, like to continue, whether, a volunteer, being, part of an organization maybe that champions justice for those that are oftentimes underserved, and we have a tremendous amount of them. We have, the Innocence Project. You read the stories from the Innocence Project. I've met people who have been exonerated and via the Innocence Project, and those are such touching stories. But they also have a flip side that they make you so damn angry that they found themselves in those situations to begin with, and you just want to stop that. If you had a magic wand, that's the one thing I would do with magic wand, is get rid of the implicit bias, get rid of the less than perfect police work and prosecutorial work. The role of the prosecutor is to seek justice, not to get convictions, to seek justice. And oftentimes, that might not be the highest priority. So I see things from the system, from the inside, and I want to continue to work to help change it. I don't know what that's going to be. I truly don't. Once I retire, I'm probably going to I tell people, well, I'm going to take 6 months off, do absolutely nothing, and just try and wrap my head around retirement. But it'll probably be less than that. I couldn't sit still for that long. So I don't know.
Well, we promised that we would have you done by 12:45, so we're 2 minutes over. We would love to have you again because we have so many other things we could talk about, but thank you so much. It was an honor to have you with us. It's great to hear your perspectives on the judiciary, and we really do enjoy the partnership on Judicial Votes Count. We absolutely believe in the critical role that voters play and civics education play in making sure that voters participate in judicial elections in an informed and active way. So
I 100% agree. If we don't educate our youth, if we don't concentrate in grade school and go forward, high school, etc., we're lost. We can see we're lost because of the fact that we haven't, concentrated on that in our school system appropriately. And so we brought this on ourselves. We did, and we've got to change it ourselves. And youth is our future. So thank you all. God bless you all. And thank you for the 98 people that are participating here. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. And just a reminder that was with Supreme Court Justice, and we have some upcoming events. We're just going to point out to you real quick a few things. Council of Churches has a program tomorrow night on redistricting, and we have so many programs this month on redistricting. So please make sure you're watching those, and please give to fair districts. It's a once in a decade lifetime to make sure we bring fair maps to the people of Ohio. If you have young people in your life, please make sure they're a member and that they join Youth in Action, which is a space for and by youth around activism and civic engagement. Members are the heart and soul of this organization. Please make sure you're a member. And that's all. We'll be back soon for Luncheon with the League. We appreciate all of you so much. Thank you to Michael Barron and Cynthia Peoples and all the League staff for making events like this possible. Take care.